So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Elodie and Maria, for explaining a little bit more when we are starting with this class. Because yes, I wanted to speak first of all about Diana because it's the first reference of this school, this project that we are here now. Well, you are there, I'm here in the virtual world, but yes, I want to start with a twist because in the typical classes, we say the exercise or the proposal for the workshop at the end of the talk, but now I wanted to explain it at the beginning because I want you to look for this exercise in all the artists that I'm going to present to you. Like I was saying, this proposal that we're going to work later with the painting is an exercise to think the borders of the painting. So in general, when we start with the empty sheet or any canvas, like we tend to focus on the center or to think about doing something. Many times happens when you start drawing or copying something, when we end up in the border, you know, we need like more space, or maybe something is too big or too small. So our exercise is very basic, but we're gonna think in the limits, you know, on this or of canvas. So I'm going to talk in this PowerPoint basically about references for my work. These are artists that I admire or that I like. And mostly you can find also examples of expanded painting as a language beyond the technique, beyond the materials, you know, painting as a language of forms and colors. And also I'm very interested in the political dimension of abstraction and geometrical art. So we're gonna have some examples of that. Try to focus in Latin American art, but I have everything. So I want to talk about limits and borders and spaces because the spirit of the show is, as you saw, is kind of a platform for inviting other artists to interact, to reinvent and take over. So the frame in the scenery that you saw in the nave comes from another series that I call Dollhouse. That's why we put also the toys next to it. That's a relationship. So today we're going to think in the limit. And like I say, pay attention or try to look for that in the different artists that I'm going to show. The limit of concept, patterns, decoration, meaning, etc. So starting with Diana, like I think Elodie, I think I understood that she explained how Diana worked with reinventing education in the Argentinian scene to many generations, right? Since the 80s, she's been working, you know, in this sort of school. Here you can see an example of what one of the clinics, the art clinics she runs look like, you know, in her own house, in the living room. Talking about scenarios, the thing is with this first transformation, you can see the difference of the traditional classroom, to the intimacy of a home. You already have like a warmness that you don't have in a traditional school, right? So the thing about Diana's work is that also it's an invitation in many levels. She also have a dictionary with words from art history and many other words that are defined by people that she invites to talk about. This one is the book that talks about the method of learning through the art clinic. And for example, one of the things that I would like to practice here after in the workshop, one of the things of the method is to approach other people's work with questions instead of judgment. And for example, instead of saying, like an opinion or an affirmative sentence, everyone has to format the opinion in the shape of a question. And this is very important because the question opens dialogue instead of being a judgment that closes, the work in one vision. So I think one of the most important things about Diana's method is that she also coordinates like a groupal knowledge that is going to develop like a collective mind, into the thinking of someone's work. I think that is very revolutionary in terms of the traditional structure of the school because, and I know from many friends that in the universities, for example, the teachers are encouraging competition instead of cooperation, right? So one of the basics of this school is also the cooperation, between the participants. Another work that from Diana that is very is a good example of this thing of collaboration is the Madonna that started in 1985 with this painting in the center that is by Diana. The Madonna is like a version that protects artists. And the rest of the installation is a group work of all the people that she invites in every place where the Madonna is shown as a procession. So the Madonna was in different parts of Argentina, touring from different museums and cultural centers or places. And every time the Madonna installation changed with the local artists. So she goes around, trying to bless everyone and also giving a space to show and portraying like different scenes of, the local artists. This is the version without other people. Like I say, think about the borders and how the painting take different shapes and manifestations. I forgot to bring a glass of water, so I'm gonna take one very quickly. Okay. Because also I wanted to share now my second big reference and the person that I admire a lot, and it's Maria. So, because Maria is also a great example of everything that I was saying before about collaboration, love, and painted like expanded from the tradition, right? And for this, I asked Maria to talk about her work in French. So.
And you take a water glass. Aprovecha para ir a tomar agua.
Yeah, I take the glass too.
Bon, donc bon, je vais être très courte, mais voilà, c'est avec Ad, on avait à un moment, par initiative de Ad, il a créé un groupe qui a fonctionné pendant 10 ans, un groupe qui a pris son origine en 2008 à peu près, qui s'appelait Pintoras. Donc, elle a été à l'initiative d'un rassemblement de 20 femmes artistes en Argentine qui ont travaillé tout ce sens de la peinture dans un sens vraiment élargi et féministe et qui a donné lieu à des diversités d'aspects un peu non usuels de comment pratiquer la peinture. Dans ce cas, elle est en train de présenter, de passer des images d'un travail que j'ai fait récemment ici en France, dans le Lot-et-Garonne, mais qui est une suite que je suis à ce moment, qui est une expérimentation de volume à partir de la surface peinte par des répétitions de patterns géométriques. Je pourrais vous en dire plus parce que c'est une géométrie particulière, une géométrie hyperbolique qui crée comme des proliférations naturelles. Mais surtout, c'est cette expérience jusqu'à quand la surface peinte peut devenir volume, jusqu'à quand ce volume reste toujours peinture. Voilà, c'est un questionnement dans ce sens-là. Je vais continuer à... Mais bon, cette pratique de la peinture est passée aussi de la toile au textile et surtout à l'utilisation de l'image comme une image importée d'un objet. Et donc, voilà, c'est toutes ces variables d'ajustement entre l'image, la peinture et le volume qui m'intéresse de travailler. Et pour ceux qui s'appliquent à ce cours-là, vous verrez que chacune de ces choses, c'est des morceaux de couleur dans lesquels les bords ne sont justement pas définis, mais que c'est ces bords qui définissent la forme de l'objet. Donc, dans le cadre de ce qui est proposé de faire aujourd'hui, un bord peut aller très très loin. Le bord, ce n'est pas juste le limite. Le bord peut déterminer un volume, peut être une forme sinueuse, peut donner lieu à des tas de choses qui excèdent le bord du support. Et ce petit travail donc, de surface peinte m'a amené parfois à créer des espèces de costumes qui s'inscrivent dans une espèce d'histoire, de narration, comme si c'était un théâtre. C'est pour ça que ça vient bien dans les cadres aussi de cette expo, cette envie de raconter donc une fiction, une chose qui va apparaître à partir de cette espèce de décor qui reste, qui nous entoure, mais dans lequel c'est à nous un petit peu de jouer la pièce. Hein. Donc, c'est aussi, quand on parle d'un bord, on parle aussi d'une scène, on parle aussi des bords du cadre de scène qui est dans cette exposition-là. Et à l'intérieur de cette scène vont se passer des tas de choses. Des fois, en définissant cette scène, on sait ce qui peut se passer à l'intérieur. On invente aussi peu à peu ce qui va se passer à l'intérieur. Donc ça aussi, c'est dans le cadre de ce qu'on va réfléchir ensemble aujourd'hui, si vous le voulez bien. Bon, ça c'est vraiment il abonde dans les pièces. J'aurais voulu qu'elle passe plus vite, mais il y a un lien avec un lien important pour moi dans cette histoire à raconter avec le paysage, le féminisme et l'extractivisme. Cette pièce, elle s'appelle, si je me souviens, en fait, on entend le bruit de la fracture, parce que ces signaux que vous voyez là, c'est les sondages qu'on fait pour trouver des failles dans le fond de la mer et pour savoir s'il y a du pétrole. Donc, ce coquillage, il est perverti en tant qu'élément naturel Et au lieu de nous parler de son état naturel, qui est les bruits de la mer, il est en train de nous parler, par cette surimposition d'image, de ce problème qu'on a une partie des humains avec la nature, qui la considère comme quelque chose à s'approprier et à tirer profit. Thème qui est un lien, bien sûr, avec tous les courants d'écoféminisme qui font un parallèle avec toutes ces notions extractivistes de la nature et la façon dont la place que les femmes ont prise dans le système économique et social dans l'histoire, et qui serait une chose, bien sûr, à modifier. Donc, c'est une dernière pièce, c'est un carnet d'observation qui se complète avec un objet qui fait lien au corps aussi parce que c'est comme un petit lissage d'un humain. Mais à côté, c'est un carnet qui retrace justement cette idée du paysage et de l'exploitation d'hydrocarbures. En plus, c'est un carnet de comptabilité ancien dans lequel, bon, il y a 500 pages, je n'ai pas rempli les 500 avec des dessins, mais je compte bien le finir un jour.
No, I just want to add, in case I didn't understood everything, but for me it's very important on how, in your case, the pictorial language is liberated from any technique or device of the tradition, but also liberating like other ways of representing, social issues, science fiction, or like the liberation in your work. It goes in so many directions that I'm a big fan. Just want to say that. Thank you, Maria. Muchas gracias. No. Following, I'm gonna jump into another of the references in my work. As you saw, the doll houses, the toys, and I wanted to bring this artist, Alma, as an example of a representation of what was Bauhaus. Alma is a German designer that focus on geometry for the daily life. In 1923, she developed these toys. The one in the bottom left is the furniture. Also, well, she made the full bedroom for kids for this exposition of Bauhaus. And I thought it was like a nice reference also because when we talk about Bauhaus, we forget all the woman artists that was part, and Alma was one of the more successful beyond the textile workshop from Bauhaus. That's another thing that I try to look with this school is not to go with all the masters or the typical representations that we have in art history. And in that sense, I wanted to name also Lucy Mingo. She's an artist. She's 90 years old now, part of the quilt maker, member of the She's Band Collective in Alabama. Another example of geometry in the house, warm geometry, painting being used, expanded from the traditional support, or it's painting that it's also in the house, it's also having multiple directions and functions. Because it works as a painting, it works as a quilt, it's protection. It's breaking with these definitions, right? She also was a member an early member of the Freedom Quilting Bee, which was a cooperative and alternative economic organization in 1966 to raise socioeconomic status on Black communities in Alabama mostly, but also funding actions for voting rights and other civil rights movements. So, and also this cooperative ran until 2012. And I like this reference of the political power of a practice of this quilting, that in Latin American history, for example, art is not conceived as political if it's not figurative or kind of propaganda. And also in United States, this type of work is called folk art. But I think it's very important to bring it up as an artwork because of all these dimensions, like political and feminist, that it brings with. Jenny also is part of G-Band group, and I highly recommend to Google them. If you have time later, one of the good things of this school is that you can use your phone during the workshop, and also if you look something that you like from all this, I can give you the names to look later for more works. I like this contrast between the quilting work and Seda Catunda, that is a Brazilian painter, and while she's totally immersed in the mainstream of art, of the art world, it's not considered folk art, although her work also used textiles like towers, bedclothes, velvet, etc. But I like this warm dimension that her work has, not being like the stretched painted on the canvas and taking over the space, like literally dropping from the wall to the floor. And in another direction, maybe the opposite, I wanted to bring another very important artist for Argentinian history. I bring her as an example of also a wide spectrum because her work went from sculpture, performance, happenings, I don't know, she did everything. Installation, from conceptual abstraction of the body and capitalist exploitation, because the part in the right picture is a typical card that cartoneros use here in Argentina. I don't know how to translate cartoneros, but it's like
C'est des récupérateurs de cartons qui sont jetés dans la rue, sauf que ici il y a le recyclage, mais là-bas c'est les gens pauvres qui donc les ramassent et le vendent pour avoir une espèce de recyclage privé. Donc ces gens-là on les appelle les cartoneros.
Well, I think the political dimension is obvious, but the twist of painting everything in white brings like so many interpretations and possibilities that are definitely working in the coding of painting for me. She also worked a series of called small objects called objetos alquímicos in the 1988. In this case, for example, the gold represents like European extractionism since, Cologne, since the colonization, and well, these small objects are another reference for me, of political geometry and abstraction. And another artist, younger, 36 years old, from República Dominicana, and now she's living in Mexico for quite time. Madeline, I met her in a residency and I fell in love with her work because also use geometry and patterns, rethink about the body, sexuality, race. For example, here you can see the painting going into the water because she also take the works out of the gallery, not only out of the wall, but out of the gallery into the parks. And this one was a performance, putting the work into one of the Mexico City parks that has like a laguna, like artificial water there. So this one, for example, is a sex toy. So all her white and black patterns, black and white patterns are merged or fused with other things like hair extensions. Here, I like how you can have the work, you can see the rectangle, canvas, the shape, the very traditional, but the way is mounted with the hair to open so many. This is her doing a video performance in the residency where I met her, taking some with the work. Another artist from, reside in Latin America. I like Elizabeth Wilde because I work also with collage, with the idea of collage. I do it more digitally, but she used to work with magazines, to create these abstract compositions. But I love how vibrant and very small also are, like the size of the magazine too. And I like her work also in relationship with Vivian Sutter because they are mother and daughter, and Vivian is the daughter. And I like the contrast between their work and how they dialogue, even though they didn't plan it that. And this is another example, like Leda, breaking with the canvas, with the stretchiness, and also doing her typical movement of layering the paintings to transform space. And talking about transforming spaces, mural are like one of the first or the biggest instrument, to rethink the space and the white cube mostly. I wanted to share also in Teri's work that not only works on the walls and the typical canvas, but also she used embroidery for many series, also in different size, like she can do giant embroideries like this one we are looking at the top. She also designed furniture and talks about architecture. This one was an installation for the Cultural Center here in Buenos Aires, and the design of this furniture was planning like a didactical installation that was interactive. And many of her work has this dimension of thinking pedagogy because she also worked a lot in that field with education, with rural education. And this is a project of a playground, like an abstract playground. But another Argentinian artist that is a big reference in terms of queering, also painting, is Maria Scafati, that also think about the canvases as bodies, where she can practice this art of the rope, and also using clothes to give more entity to the colors, to make this metaphor of the body and the flesh and the color. The direction of abstraction and sex, I also want to name Ulrike Müller, that she's an artist living in New York. It's one of the reference I met into this querying of geometry and abstraction. I'm a big fan too. And in terms of design and how the painting also invades or it's part of the daily life or the architecture, I wanted to share. Esther is one of the belly artists. Of course, I love the colors and the patterns from the traditional the belly art. It's also a female practice that is passed from mother to daughters, and she said she learned it when she was 10 years old from her mom. The same is very political art because this style receives the British colonization, the apartheid cultural DNA, right? And of course, there is what she does, taking these traditional patterns that are painting the houses to the cars. And I wanted to bring in that direction also the work of Nathalie Dupasquier, that I think the whole Memphis group also still the whole 80s, rock from African textiles that I wanted to show, this. And to think about limits and borders back to South America, or how indigenous people call it Ayala. Another group that make history with the shaped canvas way before Frank Stella was Madi Group and concrete art between Buenos Aires and Montevideo, Argentina and Uruguay. So this group break with the illusion of the window, of the landscape. Think about concrete art as something that is invented and doesn't copy anything from the rest of the reality. So from the group, I wanted to highlight Vigilant, because I think it's a great example on this breaking limits, even in the same formula that the Madi group used in the 40s. This is for 1940s. And this series of her works, how leaving the center of the composition, as empty, and also working these sharp points. I think it's a shame that all this work is not more accessible in other parts of the world, because it's very important, like I say, for Argentina. And coming back to more contemporary scene, Cristina Schiavi is also a colleague. It's a more contemporary example of this line of abstraction in Argentine art, and one of my favorites. She used cartoonish characters and different materials. So, for example, here is a mosaic, to mix different layers of popular references. This color of mosaic is very traditional in Buenos Aires bathrooms, it's a type of color that I find in my grandmother's bathroom or many other houses. And also the use of card boxes to make the contrast between fine art and popular materials. This intervention was in 2003 in Museum of Latin American Art, that's called La Toma, and she covered the entire elevator box, that goes between all the floors. It's also covered in cardboard. This elevator in real life it's made of glass, and it's all translucent. And her work also transforms spaces like scenographically, with the sculptures that are 3D paintings, transforming the whole space into a big painting. I don't know if in this one you can go inside, but I also like this tender and humorous dimension that you cannot find in the avant-garde, from the 40s, but this also color, the pink, And I'm ending with this work by Cristina, also La Torta, the cake from 1993 that was saying in honor of people that caring people that she lost because of HIV. And that's it. And I leave you with this image. Let me know if there is something you want to tell me or ask. Basically, I wanted to show you, like, from my own universe, of people that I like and admire, examples to look for this expansion of painting. Even though you're going to work in a small format, I want you to think about all the surface, you know, as a place, as a space that you can, starting with the borders, you know, like also maybe leave the center to share with other people and to work together. I don't know, María, ¿quieres decir algo o...?
Merci Anne. Je ne sais pas si ça vous pose, si vous voulez poser des questions a Anne, c'est le moment. ¿Te vas a quedar con nosotros un tiempo, Anne? O,
Yeah, let me know anything you need. Like, we usually like take a break in other classes, like, so you can start, you know, taking the materials, rearrange the space. Si quieren tomar un break y reordenar el espacio o...
Sí, vamos ahora a distribuir las cosas. Monsieur a une question. Oui, monsieur a une question. Le señor que quiere preguntar algo.
Thank you for showing us all the work of your School of Art, because it's really a school of art for me. I'm discovering that. And just, it's a splendid work. I've got one question. Do you have any representative in Europe of that School of Art? In Europe or in France? Do you have any representative or artist working in France or in Europe on the same trend as you?
Well, for example, Rick Mueller is, I think, also an artist that in New York works a lot of collaborative projects that are like, I don't know, from getting together to drawing and even making porn movies. But they're also, for example, Sol Calero did the Escuela del Sur, that is also a big reference because she works in installations, and in this one of the schools, she also developed a huge program with other artists debating Latin American art scene and the debates from political art. And there are other examples in the United States.
But nothing in Europe.
Nothing in Europe. It's new.
Nothing in Europe.
Yeah, it's really new for me. I don't know for
Well, Sol Calero lives in Berlin.
Okay.
And there is also
connection with French.
other artists working like alternative. Julieta Ortiz de la Tierra is another friend that is living in Berlin and taking, you know, the direction of Diana Eisenberg's art clinics into her practice, also with her group of artists. What else?
Does that mean that the galleries in Europe are not interested by this kind of work?
No, I think the type of education that alternative that is, for example, developed in Argentina is also responded to the Argentinian context, where institutions are not so strong in terms of budget resources. For example, when I went to the art school of fine arts, the National School of Fine Arts, I remember I used to fight all the time. We were struggling with budget cuts, and I remember I spent a lot of my time in the school, militando. How do you say, like in the art student center, like doing political protests to fight the government that was trying to disappear the school, And I think that the lack of security, that something that is bad and is wrong at the same time, creates a lot of alternative options, because people is fighting, for art education. So they're fighting through her homes, from getting together, from experimenting. So I think it's something from the context also. And it's not because of galleries itself. I think it's because of the whole system. And it's sort of, it's a resistance.
Thank you.